Nerd Night number 52. Is it cold in here, or is it just me?
So yeah, that's me in Antarctica. Hi everybody, my name's Maris. It's a picture of Antarctica and it says, is it cold in here, is it just me? But really, more appropriately, it should be titled, Every Toilet is a New Adventure. I'm going to talk about pooping in buckets later, but I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of my trajectory. So like, how did I get to Antarctica? It was not on my radar until 2014. The easy answer is because of my job. And what is my job, pray tell? Well, I am an artist and writer. That sounds too pretentious. I'm an artist and writer of comic books. So I would like to share with you, this is going back about 10 years. This is a comic called Turtle Powder. There's a turtle. That's me down there looking at the turtle. It's in an aquarium. The turtle poops. And then all the fish eat the poop. This is high art, my friends. I, from a very young age, drew comics, drew cartoons, and I really like marrying science and art, science and comics. So this obviously isn't enough to constitute a career. So how did I get to be an artist and writer of comic books? Well, I'll give you the academic answer. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Illustration from Nite School of Design, which was a fantastic educational experience. And I can also tell you that I've worked a lot of weird jobs. I was a summer camp counselor first, then I became a farm worker and learned how to drive tractors, then I became a baker, and then for a while I was an EMT. I taught sailing for a bit, and when I started to kind of steer back into the education part, I did a year of volunteer service through AmeriCorps, and I worked at a children's museum in Providence, and I learned all about museum education and working with kids, infants up through middle school age, and I kind of just got really psyched about teaching kids science, but I didn't want to be a teacher. And I knew I had this art background, but it's really hard to make a living with just art. Like, it's still, I'll talk about that later. Anyways, I ended up at the aquarium in Boston, the New England Aquarium, and that's part of the reason why I made this comic, is for 8 years, I was an educator there, and I would take tide pool invertebrates like sea stars and snails and hermit crabs and put them in a cooler and drive them to a school and have them in a classroom in water. I didn't cook them up on a grill and I'm like, okay kids, sustainable seafood. But I got really into this out of school time education and engaging not just kids but engaging other human beings with in ways that we're not really used to in school settings. I really like hands-on experiential education. It's a little harder to do it with comics because I'm missing from the equation. I mean, I'm making the pictures, but it's not me being like, let's look at this thing about stuff under the sea or the human body, which I'll talk about. So, what do you do with those two things? You love educating, you love making content for other human beings. Content's such kind of a dirty word. You like making comics for humans, and you have this weird background of education. 8 years at the aquarium is pretty much like undergrad in bio and then some, or either undergrad in marine bio. The institution, the New England Aquarium, was fantastic about kind of furthering continuing ed. So I knew more about limpets than the PhD students who studied seals. That doesn't mean that I'm not smarter than them. It's just because once you're a PhD, you're really focused on an organism, and they'd be like, I don't know what a limpet is. I study mammals. I'm like, oh, limpets are so great. I figured I wanted to fuse these two loves. Back up a little bit. I don't have a writing background. I know that sounds silly because everybody who does put words on a piece of paper does, even if it's gibberish, there's your background. I thought of myself as just an artist. So my first gig was actually illustrating a book by a fantastic local author, Jim Ottaviani. This was my dream job. I wanted to draw science comics, but I didn't have to write them because I just didn't think I could. So it focuses on the early careers of Jane Goodall, Diane Fossey, and Barate Galdicas. It was fantastic. I did not get to go to either Africa or Indonesia for this book. There was no on-site research. The next book, they cut me loose and they said, hey, why don't you write your own book? And I was like, I got a D in English sophomore year of high school. I don't know if you want me doing this. I had kind of classic shy kid, probably coupled with being a girl in school, and I had pretty crappy self-esteem throughout middle school and high school. So I didn't think of myself as being able to write anything at all, and I had English 101, which is it existed in my school. In college, my English teacher took me aside and he goes, you're good at this, would you want to write more? And I go, nobody's ever said I'm good at writing. So I had that in the back of my head that I was like, one teacher one time told me I could write, but that doesn't constitute a career in writing. But what really kicked it is Jim, who wrote Primates. I go, do you want to work on another book together? I really want to make more books like this, and I don't know how. And he goes, why don't you write your own book? And obviously I'm skipping over a lot of the stuff. Breaking into comics is a long and arduous task, and there's no right or wrong. Well, there's a wrong way, because then you don't break in, but it took a while, but I told you I was an EMT. I got certified to be EMT my senior year of college because I didn't know what I was going to do with an art degree, so it seemed like working on the back end of an ambulance was a good idea, right? So I got certified, and it was great, and I was working in Cambridge and Boston, and you actually apprentice. I wasn't employed. You basically, you shadow paramedics. So I went out for a couple of shifts, and I was like, yeah, I can't do this. Like, it's really hard, like you're with medics, and medics are dealing they're basically like a traveling ER. So I saw, to quote something, I saw some shit, guys. It was crazy. And it was actually really hard for me to admit that I didn't want to do it because A, it came from a place of privilege. I knew I could get another job where I could pay the bills. So I was like, okay, this thing I trained for that I spent money and time to do, I can actually say I don't want to do it. And two, it was a failure to me. And failures aren't bad. I tried something, it didn't work out, and I said, let's try something else. So I took my EMT experience because getting your EMT is awesome. It's a really great crash course, no pun intended, in human anatomy and physiology, and it's hands-on. The reason why I wasn't a great student in middle school and high school, specifically writing, I'm a hands-on learner. I need to be doing something, and I didn't realize that until I was a lot older. And it helps me to learn a thing by doing it. So this book happened. It takes you through the human body systems, each chapter by chapter. The skeleton adds them all, and then it's fun. Anyways, I worked at the aquarium for 8 years. What was next? And oh, sorry, I should mention that I didn't get to shrink down and go inside the human body. There was no field research for that book. What's next? Coral reefs. My publisher was like, hey, you worked at the aquarium for a while. Do you want to write a book about coral reefs? And I was like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I've never seen one before. They're like, oh, you should just do research. It's fine. I'm like, no, I've never seen one before. I think I need to. So at this point, I was starting to get, not cabin fever, but I was starting to crave the experiential education for myself. And I said, from each book forward, and these are the only 3 books that I have out. I don't have that expansive of a, I'm working on 3 more. I go from each book forward, I'm going to set aside time and money to have an experience that helps contribute to the book in some way, shape, or form. So I got scuba certified when I was 33 years old. This is not the Boston Harbor where I did my checkout dive. Okay, if you can dive in the Boston Harbor, you can dive anywhere. My checkout dive was 2 feet visibility, holding onto my buddy, being like, I think I saw a lobster. No, it's a rock. Just feeling around. And then I got to go finally see coral reefs in the Caribbean. I accompanied the New England Aquarium on a trip to Bimini, which is one of the small islands in the Bahamas. And they get permits to both do research and also collect fish for the aquarium in Boston. So I can go on a whole thing about that, but this is really about, Antarctica. So, sorry, back up. I haven't gotten to talk about Antarctica much, and I felt like I needed to give you backstory. When I got scuba, this is going to sound super hippy-dippy. When I got scuba certified, it changed my life. Scuba changed my life, man. It was amazing. No, without revealing too much, I had spent a really long time working 7 days a week, 14 hours a day. When those 3 books I just showed you, I was working full time at the aquarium and doing these books at night on the weekends. I was basically leading 2 lives, and it was eating me up. You go 13 years without taking a vacation or a weekend, and it messes you up. So I came back, and I was deeply unhappy, and I had to fix a lot of stuff, and that took a lot of. I don't need to go into it. Whatever. Scuba changed my life. I got back from this trip, and I'm running because that's what I do when I need to escape my problems. I'm just gonna run. And I run into this person I met at a comic convention who wasn't even from my town. I'm like, Jen, what are you doing here? And she's like, oh, I'm visiting a friend. And I was like, how's it going? She's like, pretty good. She's like, how's it going with you? I'm like, everything's falling apart. I didn't know this person. I'm like, everything's falling apart. I was so unhappy. And I just went scuba diving, and I was really happy. And so she goes, it sounds like you need to have some more experiences outdoors. And she's from Australia. And she goes, your country has this grant where they send artists and writers to Antarctica. And I go, uh-huh. And she goes, yeah, look it up. So I did. And that's how I got to Antarctica. And 2 years later, I ended up there. Yeah, that was me having my epiphany. So grant is hard. I've never done it before. I'm not actually a scientist. I just play one on TV. Or I don't actually play one on TV. I'm just not. I'm a scientist in spirit. So I had to do a lot of research for something that might never come into fruition. The grant is really intense. It's a National Science Foundation grant, and they do send artists and writers to Antarctica. It's also a teacher's one, too, if anybody in the audience is thinking, like, I want to go to Antarctica. So I did some basic research on Google. This is a map of the United States. It's missing something, like Antarctica's not on there. Okay, I looked at the second map that comes up when you Google world map on Google. Okay, oh, no, okay. Seriously? No Antarctica? Like, what is the deal with this? Okay, you go through 10 maps. The first, like, all the hits for world map. And finally, I'm like, oh, this is like Mercator projection wrong. Like, this is why globes make sense instead of maps. But just as like, that's not what it looks like. So maybe if we rotate the globe on its axis a little bit. Okay, we're getting closer there. You can see Antarctica. At least it's on the freaking map. Rotate a little bit more. This gives you a pretty good idea. You're basically staring at the planet's butthole right now, like the southern end of Earth. So here's Antarctica. That is the southern part of South America. There's the southern part of Africa, and there's Australia and New Zealand. I don't need to. We're going to zoom in a little. Enhance. So just because we don't need to worry about the other continents right now, we're getting Antarctic centric. The United States has 3 stations in Antarctica. One is McMurdo Station, which is the largest station on the continent. South Pole Station right here in the middle. Well, it's South Pole. There's 2 South Poles. There's the geographic, and then there's also the magnetic South Pole. We'll get into that later, or maybe not at all. And then there's this is like paradise up here on the Antarctic Peninsula. Palmer Station is there, and Palmer Station, there's like actual plants that grow on the Antarctic Peninsula, so that's why I was like saying tropical. I was psyched about McMurdo because the most diverse science that I could have access to would be there. So that is where I would like. Oh look, we zoomed in even more. I'm going to talk a little bit about the ice shelf later, but where there's ocean, there's Antarctica is covered in a lot of ice, like a lot, like 98% of the continent, and it's a continent. It has land below that ice. I know sometimes people are like, oh, it's just ice. I'm like, no. There's land underneath there. It's a continent. 98% of that continent is covered with ice, and the average thickness of that ice is about 1.2 miles thick. A lot of ice. Where McMurdo is, it's actually really close to the Ross Sea, so that there's ice shelf, which is really thick, but then the sea freezes over. So any ocean that freezes over, it's about 9 feet of ice, of sea ice. So there's actually a lot of really cool marine bio stuff that can happen there. That's, yeah, again, just in case you didn't know where McMurdo is. So comics, and this kind of talks a little bit about what Hannah said, and a little bit what Zach touched on too. They're not always seen as an ideal media, both within art and within science communication. They have this connotation that they're just comic strips or funny pages or superhero stuff. So I knew going into this that I was really going to have to convince the National Science Foundation that comics is the way to communicate science. And my pitch basically was to make a graphic novel, a comic book, you can call it either or, it's just a long comic, about life and science in Antarctica. It's funny because National Science Foundation was there. They came back and they're like, "This is actually a really great pitch. You have to change comic book to graphic novel." And like, I had to just bite the bullet because I'm like, the semantics, whatever. It doesn't matter because it just sounds better that way. I'm like, it's funny because like 15 years ago when you said graphic novel, people were like, "Oh, so you draw porn comics?" I'm like, no, not that type of graphic. So it was a 6-page comic that was a pitch about how I could use comics as an engaging way, and I don't like to get pigeonholed, but I do think a lot about students and a lot about young people when I'm making my comics, just because selfishly when I write comics, I'm writing them for myself, but I'm also writing them for like little kid mares, because little kid mares would have eaten this stuff up, just like, oh yeah, comic books and science, woo! So my baseline was to get people, like the book's goal, I'm working on the book right now, the book's goal is to get people engaged and just knowledgeable. I mean, you Google world maps and they're not even on the world map, and it's a pretty important continent. One, because it's cool, because penguins, but 2, yeah. From a global perspective, it's actually really important, like, to think about this whole planet as a habitat, as an ecosystem. And that's part of the reason why there's so many people doing science down there, is because they're looking at climate change or atmospheric science or, cosmic rays or foraminifera. There's a whole bunch of crazy science happening down there. So 1.5 years later, 8 vials of blood, a rectal exam, Just like a lot. They make you do a lot of stuff before you go to Antarctica. I remember going and like my doctor's like, you need a 12-point EKG workup, and I was like, yeah. Also, stick your finger in my butt too. That's the last thing on the exam. And she's like, that's not the worst thing I've done this week. I'm like, sweet. What's the worst thing? Anyway, so there was a lot of preparation. It's funny when I'm doing all this medical stuff. I actually don't officially have the grant. They were stringing me along. They're like, so we're going to need you to do all this blood work and testing. I'm like, yeah, but do I have the grant? We're going to need you to do all this testing. I'm like, oh, okay. It was a long, long waiting game of being like, am I going to go? And I asked for 2.5 to 3 months. I asked for that long. So I knew that if this was going to happen, it was going to shake up my life a little bit. I only have houseplants. So, I mean, I have a partner as well, but like, I don't have kids or pets that are animal in nature. So this is where I called home for 2.5 months. McMurdo Station. That's my dorm down there. It's home to around 1,000 people in Antarctic summer, which is our winter. During the Antarctic summer, the sun does not go down. It just circles around the sky like a vulture waiting. No, it doesn't go down. 2.5 months I didn't see the sun set. It was amazing. Also, your body doesn't really know when it's supposed to sleep. When the sun doesn't set, so I was just like, I'm awake all the time, this is great. And I didn't actually sleep, but that's me in my office looking super smarmy. I was stationed at McMurdo, but I had access and worked with over 16 different science teams, so that allowed me to go off the station and to do some field research. So before they do that, there's a lot of risks in Antarctica, but they want to really mitigate those risks, so they prepare you with gear and clothing and horror stories. Not actually. This is talking about being scared, Zach. Just like, I'll tell you about that one time. But the risks there are real. We're not supposed to be there as animals. You can die there from exposure pretty darn fast. There are crevasses. There are a lot of dangers. So they provide most of your clothing, but I opted to bring my own underwear and long underwear and socks. And I live in Massachusetts, so I actually have some pretty good winter gear. So I brought a lot of that stuff because I don't really want to like breathe into the neck gaiter that like 20 other people have breathed into. I don't care how many times it's been through the wash. Just I want to tell you what it's kind of like to get dressed for when you're doing field research. If you're going off station, you can't leave like that because that's inappropriate. So you have your pile of clothes. Socks! Let's start with socks, because I put on the underwear because I was like, I don't know if I could draw a naked picture of myself for this presentation. Put on one sock, put on another sock. Oh, lightweight base layer. This is their first layer of like long underwear. I opted for synthetic silk. Kind of stinky, but comfortable. This is taking notes, because it gets pretty cold in Michigan here, right? Putting those on. Yeah, okay. Oh man, is it really not going to show up? Surprise article of clothing. It's just it's the anticipation of pulling on the top. More socks, because who'd have thunk? You know, it doesn't hurt to have lots of socks. It's really important. Part of the reason for multiple pairs of socks is the boots I'm going to show you later. Midweight base layer. These were a pair of fleece sweatpants that were worn by many, many people before, because I was like, yeah, it's fine. Put those pants on. Yeah, this is taking forever. Okay, let's skip to all the bits. Snow pants and a fleece and a sweater. The bunny boots, they're these, depending upon what work you're doing there, you're issued different types of boots. I got bunny boots, which are these giant, clompy, cartoon, like, they look like, you know Mickey Mouse's gloves? They look like that, but for feet. But they're great. They keep you really well insulated. If you're standing on ice all day, you need a really good layer of rubber. And then your big red. If the picture you saw in the beginning of me is your big red coat, it's an issued coat. Many, many people have worn it. It is actually a Canada Goose coat. I have opinions about people who wear those in like North Carolina winters. I'm like, that's unacceptable. Like, you don't need that coat for this climate. So, but I keep it to myself because I'm not confrontational. So, and then gloves and mittens, hat, neck gaiter, and goggles. And there's actually mittens underneath the gloves and all sorts of stuff. Done. You're supposed to be really hydrated on that continent because it's really dry. It's a desert. Antarctica is the windiest, coldest, driest place in the planet. So they're like, drink lots of water. And I'm like, it's really complicated because once you're off station, you can't pee on the continent. You have to pee in an Nalgene bottle. It's true. They issue you a bottle. It looks like a water bottle, but it says pee on it, so you don't get confused. People have gotten confused before. I'm not one of the unlucky few, but... So, this is a recap. The reason why you have to do this is even if you're going like on snowmobile only 1 mile from weather can happen fast. And if you get stranded out there, you're going to be dead fast if you're not dressed well. So unfortunately, I couldn't go with the SEAL plan. The SEAL plan is pretty great because they're built for that climate. So all they need is blubber, 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 and blubber. And it's amazing to see living animals out here that are actually equipped and adapted to deal with the harsh temperatures there. And I was there in the summer. I was like, go somewhere for the winter? And they're just like, that's what they sound like. That's how I was just speaking seal. So, and then I got to go and draw seals. Like, this is some of the most amazing parts. And yes, I could have Googled pictures of Weddell seals, but what I was doing is seeing these animals interact with their environment and getting to talk to as many scientists as I could. And the people component was important, to be able to hear these scientists talk about what they do, how their work is important, how they're connecting it. And it was a lot easier for me to talk to biology people because that's kind of my comfort. Man, I would talk to astrophysicists and I'd be like, okay, yeah, stars. They're made of gases. But it was great. My roommate was an astrophysicist and she was working on, they basically send up, it's kind of like a satellite, but via a balloon that's the size of a baseball stadium, a long duration balloon. And they were super sensitive cameras that were studying compositions of gas, where stars are being born. I'll be very gentle with it, I'm sorry. So these are what my notes look like. Working with the SEAL teams, which was funny to call them that. It's like, oh, I'm going out with SEAL Team B276 today, and I'm expected at 8000. Anyways, I couldn't show pictures, but I did actually get to see a seal necropsy, which is the same thing as an autopsy, but it's just on a seal. So I actually got to see what they look like inside. It's really hard to find any reference of this, so it was great to see these really cool adaptations with inside. Obviously, I'm a big human body nerd and just an anatomy nerd, so any chance to see how they're adapted on the insides for this environment as well. So on a Weddell seals, you can't see it because there's a bunch of hardened lugs in the way. Their xiphoid process is shaped like a paddle. Because if you have a pointy xiphoid process and you dive down 200 feet into the water, that pointy thing's just gonna puncture all your guts. So their paddle-shaped xiphoid process is amazing. It's literally flat so that it presses against their insides without poking them. And it's that kind of stuff that I was like, that is awesome. And I know that there isn't anything out there sharing that cool information with people. Working further with the different SEAL teams, I could actually take their data and look at different ways to visualize it. And this isn't final stuff for the book. I gave a presentation with them a couple months ago, and we were just looking at different ways to make their data integrated with graphics so that you could kind of get a visual. Like this is the SEAL diving to the depth, like using actual things. And then they looked at heart rate, they looked at respiration rate, and dissolved NO, so nitrous oxide. Again, not an expert on this stuff. I just want to learn so I can teach other people. Now, the other thing that people always think about when you talk about Antarctica is volcanoes, right? Antarctica is home to the world's southernmost volcano, Mount Erebus. There's a camp right here, kind of maybe 200 feet down from the top. The volcano is a little under 12,500 feet tall. This is tall. And then if you go inside the caldera, about 300 to 500 feet down, there's an active lava lake. So if you look at how long Erebus has been erupting for, it's like, since about 1978, it's constantly erupting. Which, don't worry, it's safe. I'll show you in a little bit. Now, I practice like anybody would practice by making lots of volcano mashed potatoes. And with gravy, and I would measure to make sure I got the right ratio for the caldera to lava lake. No, that's not true. And I asked the volcanologists and the geologists up there, I'm like, do you guys do this? And they're like, hell yeah, every time we have mashed stuff, we make little volcanoes. I'm like, oh, thank goodness. This is the actual rim. It's about 2,000 feet across. And then, like I said, about 5,000 feet down. You can stand over the edge of this, and even though it's 500 feet down, sorry, I said 5,000, it's hot. And it smells a bit of egg. It's nice, it's nice. Now, Erebus, instead of having big eruptions, it kind of cranks out lava bombs every now and then. So it just thinks about its lovely lava insides. It tries really hard, and then oh, there's a lava bomb. So this is where one of the research camps used to be. No, nobody was hurt, but they had a research camp really close to the rim, and a lava bomb the size of a small car landed about 20 feet from the shack, and nobody was in there or anything, but they're like, you know what, we should leave. We should go to the one that's a little bit further down. So they left, but there are still relics of this, 15 years later, and we were cleaning up some of the stuff that's left over from this, and there is a Cadbury fruit and nut bar lying on the ground. There's a fork too, and then like a little meat bone, and then the fruit nut bar, and I look at it and I go like, this label is about vintage of 1985. I'm extensive Cadbury knowledge. I can't go between like, standard and metric, but I'm like, I know when that Cadbury bar came out based on the font. They used Cooper Black, I know, look at it, it's so nice, it's so vintage. So, it smelled. It was well preserved, but it smelled. It smelled kind of eggs. So, I got talking with some of the volcanologists, and I was like, it'd be funny if we put this in an envelope and sent it to Cadbury. And we did, and now they have it in the archives, which is awesome. I got a really nice letter back from them. They're like, thank you very much. And I wrote them this letter, like, telling them the coordinates it was found, how long it was out there for, how we actually still enjoy modern Cadbury product. Just New Zealand's the closest post for a lot of that, so you get a lot of New Zealand stuff. So, the toilets. Well, when you're out in the field and you have to pee, that's great. You just don't poop unless there's a bucket nearby. Like when I was out with the seals, I'd be like, I can't shit. Like I literally can't poop right now. I will get in trouble. They'll kick me out. So just hold it. And then, they do give you some plastic bags. And I have to say, when I had my first interview with the people that were going to be like, Maris is like, they're preparing me to come down here. The first things out of my mouth was that I go, it's nice to meet you. I just want to let you know that I'm used to roughing it, and I've actually shit in a bag quite a few times. And I just it's video chat too, and I wasn't meeting them in person. And I had done this like really hardcore kayak trip where you really had to carry in and carry out. And I mean like carry in, carry out. So it's like kayaking on these tiny islands in Maine, and I was like half my kayak's filled with poop. So. Styrofoam is amazing, and both the pee seat and the poop seat have the styrofoam, and it's the warmest toilet seat I've ever sat on. As soon as you sit down, your body heat just instantly makes it warm. It's amazing. Like, the warmest toilet I've ever sat on is in Antarctica. Go figure. With the pee situation, if you're a fella, or if you have fella parts, there's like a funnel that's plastic. They used to be metal. Then there was an incident. Yeah, I met the scientist who that happened to. He was like, yeah, I wasn't really thinking, and warm, slightly wet skin on metal, really bad. I'm like, what did you do, Sam? And he's like, I just ripped it off as soon as I could. And he was like, it was bad. And he's been doing research down there for like 35 years, so it was great. He was like seasoned vet story. So yeah, needless to say, the funnels are now plastic. For the ladies, there's actually the old Hawaiian punch cans, or there's a giant can that probably used to house some kind of fruit or vegetable with a lovingly crafted handle. So you basically pee into a funnel there, it empties out into the water, and then you go over to the fella's funnel and you throw it. Well, you don't throw it. You really don't slosh the pee, because it's just, you can't clean anything. It's just that. So you pour it gently into the funnel on the wall, and it goes into a 55-gallon drum full of urine. Pee barrels, really big pee barrels. For the pooping situation, it's a little different. Antarctica is carry in, carry out. The pee does not stay in Antarctica. It goes back to California, which, if I'm worried about the carbon footprint of my pee, but the environmental impact that it actually would have on Antarctica would be detrimental to the environment itself. And if you want to look at the history of that, before EPA stuff was in effect, before McMurdo was even pre-Antarctic treaty, so when it was more military, they would just be like, that tractor doesn't work anymore, drive it into the ocean. It's a bummer, and there's actually a whole area where the outflow there's a wastewater treatment plant in Antarctica, which is awesome. That's relatively last 10 years. The outflow area is actually hazardous. When the divers go there, they have to wear full-on Tyvek suits and get hosed off because it is a hazardous waste site. So there's actually lasting environmental damage that's been done before we had stuff in place, and that's I'm kind of interested in the history of how we treated our environment as well, and that's gonna show up in the book too. Okay, back to the shit. So there's a 5-gallon bucket in there. Depending on what camp you're at, they have complimentary sawdust. Unless you're hardcore and they're like, the sawdust weighs it down. It's just solid poop in this 5-gallon bucket. That was the last camp I went to, and I'm like, wow, the penguin folks don't fuck around. They just there's no sawdust. It's terrible. It's like, what smells worse? The penguin poop bucket or the penguins themselves? I don't know. Anyways, you poop in the bucket, you throw some sawdust in there, and everything's great. Try and use as little toilet paper as possible. The poop goes in the buckets. The buckets don't get emptied into a 55-gallon drum because that would just be cruel. And they get flown. This is actually at Erebus, so this is at pooping in a bucket 11,000 feet up. You don't roll it down the hill to get it back to station 13 miles. A helicopter comes and takes up all of your feces and urine. It's great. Just imagine this helicopter like in winds with a swaying. It's just like, that's a lot of pee and poop on the bottom of the helicopter. Just like, yeah, bye. So, there's me pooping on a bucket, just in case. I mean, I know it's not a picture. I wasn't gonna like selfie that up, but yeah. Oh, this was my favorite. This was actually at the Marine Biocamp. This is a Erlenmeyer flask with a broom handle shoved in it. And the way that they dealt with like sawdust and toilet paper, they're just like, you just pack it down when it starts getting, we gotta pack. And they had an ongoing contest who could pack the best poop bucket, because everybody's pooping. But this girl, Amanda, had like a running tally and she was the winner. She had the most dense, heaviest poop bucket of like, yeah. It's really great. There's me and my pee bottle. Not full, by the way, and I got pretty good at peeing in an Algene bottle, guys. Like it was great. I have to admit though, I did practice, because they were like, practice before you go, because if you pee on yourself and it's 0 degrees Fahrenheit, that's bad. Hypothermia is bad. So I was just like, oh cool, I'll just like take this in the shower. And anyways, maybe too much information. So having the pee bottle is helpful when I was in this tent. This was at the penguin camp, because I have to talk about penguins and then I'm done, I promise. Am I doing okay on time? So, if you didn't want to get up in the middle of the night or the weather is too bad, your pee bottle is your best friend. It's like going back to Mount Erebus, you have to climatize at these little Scott tents, and like they basically tell you to pee in your bottle and then put it next to you to keep you warm. Like I want to draw a face on it and be like, I love you, pee bottle, you're so great. But I wanted the penguin. I mean, charismatic megafauna people, penguins and seals. They're like the gateway drug to learning about this continent. So this is Cape Royds. It's a colony of about 2,000 Adelie penguins. It had been a really rough season. The sea ice, the ice that's 9 feet deep, had not opened up. There were no cracks yet. So chicks were basically starving. They had a really bad season. And the day after I arrived, a crack in the sea ice opened up, and there was much rejoicing. Like, the penguins were just so thrilled, and a lot of the chicks did make it. The next one is a video, and I'm not sure how to make it play. Do you know?
So it wasn't showing up as a video.
Oh. Yeah, in that case, just like, it kind of sounds like, and then like, the smell is like fish, no eggs. Fish, and like, fish. Cold fish that's been through a penguin's digestive system. This was fantastic to just be around and to see. Again, charismatic megafauna. These things, it's really easy to kind of like look at a penguin and, oh, there we go. There they are. I don't think you can hear them. It's just like, and they strategically make, so you'll see something fly. That was not a penguin, that's a skua. Skuas are like heavy metal seagulls. They will eat anything. Anything. I watch them dive bomb people with pizza. There's 24-hour pizza in Antarctica. It's great. Also cookies. But yeah, skuas they will pick up penguin chicks and fly away with them. And it's like, but you know what? Everybody's got to eat. The way these animals make their nests, they're out of rocks. And there's like, I can't remember what it is in math, but each nest is 1 meter from, or 3 feet from the other nest. And if it's not, you're getting pecked, like a lot. So new penguins will sometimes build a nest too close to penguins that have been there for a while. There's a lot of pecking. I watched one penguin chase off a younger penguin, and it chased it, and then it took its flipper, and it pushed the other penguin down in a pool of like muddy pee poop water. And the penguin got up, and it was just brown on the front. It was a black and tan penguin. It wasn't white anymore. And it just like dejectedly turned, and then the other penguin was like, no, I'm not done, and it chased it off. It's amazing, but you have to think, you're in this environment where like every little thing matters. Like every decision that these birds are making to stay alive is a life or death decision. So there's a lot of, forgive the pun, pecking order stuff that happens with penguins and generational things. You don't like puns, I guess. So the crack opened. I was trying to get these guys, they would come like flying up out of the ice after catching a whole bunch of krill and fish, and it was awesome. And they would go, and I'll show you what they do in a second. But it was it was really cool to see. I mean, this is a nature documentary in real life, which, yeah. So lots of drawings of penguins. They're so emotive. Adelies have a little bit of white around their eyes, like white skin, so it really just looks like they're like, oh, hi, like I'm a living cartoon. So watching them come out, so this one had just come out, and it's like, I just went swimming. And this is actually a thing in comics. If you have V brackets around words, it's actually meant to be read that it's translating. So technically this isn't penguin, but I've translated it for you lovingly into English. So wet feathers and pink feet and wings. Circulatory stuff was going on. They had these cute little pink feet. I'm home! You're home! And there's something a little bit down there. It's not an egg. And I brought dinner! Dinner is served. Oh, just great. Right straight from the crop. It's fantastic. So figuring out how all this stuff is going to go into comics. And I know Zach talked a little bit about public service announcements. This was mine. I also am a child of the 80s, so I grew up with the hole in the ozone, which is getting smaller. But still, like, lots of environmental concerns. So you have to wear sunscreen. I mean, the sun's out all the time. They're very, very serious about it. There's sunscreen stations. But this is also kind of a caricature of what a lot of people on station look like. Just people with beards. I didn't have an honorary one, but I dressed the part everywhere else. So what I'm doing right now is working on putting this into a really long comic. You guys kind of get to see, this is the first time I've been able to really talk about it, so you saw kind of behind the scenes. I'm sorry, it's going to be a while, like 2021 when it comes out, because comics take a long time. But I do update stuff on my website. It's just mariswicks.com. There's actually a whole bunch of other stuff. I got to meet a science fiction writer when I was down there. Kim Stanley Robinson was down on the ice, and I was like, oh, this is awesome! So it's just a really weird place, and there's a whole thing about kind of talking about what he actually did, the Artists and Writers Grant, 15 years before I did. But yeah, that's it.
This program was recorded on June 14th, 2018, at Top of the Park in Ann Arbor, Michigan.